Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. We're looking forward to taking a walk on the wild side with us, hopefully, through the ever sexy topic of insurance, cyber insurance, that is. And my name is Chris Susing. I'm a partner with Woodsmith, Henning and Berman. I lead our firm's national cybersecurity and data privacy practice group. I work with clients in responding to various cyber attacks, most of whom have cyber insurance, so that come through the cyber insurance channels. And then we work with them as these claims evolve down the line, data breach class actions, tech E&O litigation, things of that nature. With me, I have an esteemed panel of cyber insurance experts and a forensic firm as well, and our goal is to kind of walk you through the nuts and bolts of what is out there. And as was mentioned, we take questions, please, the good, bad, and ugly. That's what we're here for. We enjoy doing this, so definitely bring up. So with that, I'll turn it over. Monique, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Monique Ferraro. I'm cyber counsel with Hartford Steam Boiler Insurance and Inspection Company.
Hi folks, I'm Peter Hedberg. I'm a senior underwriter for Corvus Insurance. We're a Boston-based insurance insurtech operation.
Hi, I'm Violet Sullivan. I am a cybersecurity and privacy attorney, but on the tech side, I work for a forensics company called Redpoint Cyber. So we respond to threats and work a lot with this cyber insurance process because so many claims come through that direction, and we work with counsel like Chris Susing. I'm also a professor of cybersecurity and privacy law at Baylor Law School's LLM program.
Great, thank you. So what are we going to be doing today? Our plan is to initially just walk over, let's take a high-level view of what is cyber insurance. What are the types of coverages that are available out there? And again, look, you're hearing in all these other sessions the different types of risks, the different types of attacks. We're not diving into the technical aspects of it. What we're going to be sharing is what we're seeing through the insurance side, what has been coming across all of our radars, and which ones are being covered, which ones are not, and what trends that we're seeing in that space. And then I think at the end we'll be looking to share some best practices at where the cyber insurance underwriting, that aspect, the application process, really forces a lot of clients to get their cyber hygiene, to get their cyber house in order. And that's where a lot of these applications and the carriers are going in a direction to really increase that, the insurability there. So I guess at the end of this, the goal is you'll be able to, at the happy hour afterwards, talk about what the coverages are available. Go and sell this. This is a good thing, cyber insurance. And I welcome, we have healthy debates about this and whether or not there should be and whether or not it entices attackers and things of that nature. But again, we work with hundreds, if not thousands, of clients who are covered in our costs, the defense costs, the forensic costs, which can be astronomical, certainly, in responding to events. That's what the cyber insurance is there for. And I can tell you, working collaboratively with these folks, the carriers are not out there to deny or disclaim. That is not their intention, especially in this space where they're looking to really keep ahead of the game. So that's, hopefully at the end of it, you'll get some ideas about the coverages available and then be able to talk about some best practices as we take away. So I think to kick it off, Pete, I'll kick it over to you. Just let's take a step back and tell us a little bit about what is cyber insurance and how we got to where we are.
And make it sexy.
Yeah, make insurance sexy again. So this particular policy, and I'm assuming that most of you in the audience probably aren't insurance buyers and probably don't have a ton of familiarity with the process typically that's left to CFOs. So I'll just use some basic insurance language to kind of run through this. So it's its own product. You will see it sometimes get attached to different products within an insurance program, but largely it's getting purchased on a standalone basis right now. It is largely vended through the broker agent community, so your independent insurance agent that your business is using are usually going to be the ones that you'll procure it from. It is a first and third party policy, so it has elements that will pay you, like a property policy, and then it has third party elements that will pay a third party for your defense costs or any settlement costs if a third party is trying to level financial claims against you. That's a little unusual in that most insurance policies do one or the other. This one does both. So, excuse me, it will pay ransomware demands. It will also pay for lost income from business interruption during a ransomware event. The denial of service or the interruption from just any sort of encryption event that usually gets calculated by a forensic accountant, but again, these are considered insurable costs. Go ahead.
There's a difference too between, you say product, and I realize I would appreciate the translation because I came from not insurance into this world of working with insurance. Is you're going to have people that think, commercial liability, commercial insurance and property and casualty and all of these things are ways of doing business, and cyber feels extraneous, it feels fluffy, it feels intangible, and aren't you supposed to just do your job better so that we don't have to buy cyber insurance, is sometimes the comment that we hear. And so we want to be able to equip people with, this is the why. And so to bring that back is what you're covering here first is kind of like the words on paper. That's what an underwriter does, is really get the words on paper on describing the risk that they're taking off your back, right? You're not going to be able to mitigate all the risk through technology. This is only a piece of that pie of how you're going to either transfer risk or mitigate risk or even accept the risk. And one of the pieces that I think is important is beyond the words. We're going to talk about later this entire ecosystem of support that comes in, and it's not just carte blanche, we cover ransomware. There is a system of experts and support that deal with this every single day that can talk you through not only the threat hunting details, the threat actor negotiations, the probability, the statistics. I mean, these, by background, underwriters are stat nerds, right? You love the actuarial data, you love all that stuff.
Does not mean we're mathematicians, but so it's important. So for you in the audience and the type of work that you guys do, I always say that you guys are kind of the goalies of your businesses, right? You're not necessarily credited with winning games, but you have to bat 1,000 all the time because you will be credited if you lose. And that is a really difficult position for you guys to be in. On top of that, when you ask for more money in your budget to further protect your organization, it's not tied to revenue. You guys have always had a challenge going to your CFO and saying, I need more money, because the CFO says, I don't know how that makes me more money. And you go, well, it's the opposite that I'm worried about. So insurance is very well spent money in that regard. The analogy that I have for a lot of people is, if you sprinklered your house and you put it on stilts and you did all these things to try to prevent all these losses, would you go ahead and drop your homeowners? And most people I talk to say no, because I buy insurance for what I don't know. Well, the truth of the matter is, from an exposure standpoint, you guys have employees, and your employees are one of your biggest threat vectors, especially with business email compromise. Some other exposures that the policy is looking to cover from a third-party standpoint, and this is really what drove a lot of cyber insurance before ransomware hit its rise in 18, 19, and 20 underwriting years, was just the liability element. Having to pay for forensics and credit card costs, cost to reissue, or just credit monitoring for individuals affected if there was a privacy breach. So those are all still core elements to the policy as well too. I'll hand it off to Violet for this one.
I think that there's also there's a lot of misconceptions on insurance, and one of those is that has really come up recently has been that it is this like ransomware fueling missile. Because they're helping pay the threat actors. The thing that we're not seeing, probably because it's not as fun as the word ransomware, is all of the administrative details that go into this. And think about even when someone arbitrarily sues you for a breach of contract because you did something XYZ that led to an incident on their behalf, the settlements and getting the attorneys to just write a letter for you and saying it's not your fault still costs money. There's still this process of even proving yourself costs money, and without the insurance part of the process, it's sometimes harder to go to bat with just your internal team that doesn't deal with it every day and is not equipped with the responses. Did you want me to get?
Well, I was going to say, look, I know that we kind of started to break it down between the first party and third party. The first party, where you have the insurers who have the policies, and then they're handling or they're dealing with the attack itself, and then the third parties are other individuals who are bringing claims. I think, Monique, just walk us a little bit through, break down what are some of the costs that are out there that these insurance policies are covering, that are part of the actual response to an attack.
Sure. With first party, it's going to cover the cost of legal counsel, the cost of the investigation, In the case of ransomware, it'll cover the cost of the negotiation and whether or not your company plans to pay the ransom. You want to engage the threat actor because that buys you time, right? And you want to have skilled, experienced people doing that. You don't want to do it yourself because that can compromise you or your company. You want to have somebody who does it all the time, who's not going to tip your hand, and it will also cover regulatory fines and penalties, the cost of notification in the event of a data breach, the cost of data mining, which is looking for potentially affected individuals whose information has been compromised during a breach, and deduplication, so that you aren't making multiple notifications to the same individuals. And then on the third party side, it covers the cost of defense and discovery, meaning getting information, subpoenas, that kind of stuff from the other side, and the cost of settlement.
Yeah, and I can tell you from Breach Counsel, who works with clients who are experiencing that attack, who have that cyber insurance, we don't make determinations about coverage. What I can tell you is the carriers are wanting to help them through it. I can handle hundreds of incidents, and I can't think of one where the carrier is sitting there making it more difficult for the company going through the actual attack. Again, and our role as Breach Counsel is to walk them through each step of it, to say, all right, forensically, let's deal with what the issue is right now. What's happening? Are you locked down? Is it completely encrypted? Has information been exfiltrated from your system? Getting to the root of what actually happened, that's key. But what's interesting is a lot of the clients that we work with, their number one priority is getting back up and running, which makes sense, right? If your factories are ground to a halt, the Salesforce system's down, everything is down, they want to get back up and running as soon as possible. Now, we've stepped into a lot of matters that the client has tried to get back up and running sooner than them being forensically clean. And then they've been hit again afterwards. After spending hours, days, thousands and thousands of dollars to get back up and running, it happens all over again. So part of our job is to impress on them the importance of working with the experts like Violet's company and forensics to really make sure that they're clean before getting everything back up and running. And then, once that's determined, that they can get back up and clean, what are the legal obligations? And that's where, us lawyers, we not that we're making anything more difficult, we're there to walk them through. Look at the laws out there and what information has been compromised. What records? Was it patients, customers, clients? What's the scope of that risk in complying with the laws and making sure that, Monique mentioned some of the costs of the notification costs. Those can be extensive. You have a hospital that has hundreds of thousands of patient records that have been compromised. There's a whole process in terms of complying with the regulatory notification there, getting this, offering the credit monitoring to the folks who've been affected by that. Again, all these fall within these particular costs.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Just short public service announcement for all the individuals, because rarely do I have a group of security individuals in front of me. If you suspect you're in the middle of an incident, it's really important to involve your insurer as fast as you can. Your insurer has relationships with all of these vendors, and they've got pre-negotiated rates. One of the biggest sources of claim denials right now that I'm seeing is people panic. They go out, they sign a schedule of work with a forensics vendor at an astronomical price because it hasn't been pre-negotiated with an insurance company. They take all of those costs, stack them up, and just hand them to the insurance company and say, pay me. That's actually a violation of the insurance contract. We need to get involved a lot earlier. So, public service announcement over. I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, I think the other thing that I wanted to point out is Monique mentioned data mining, and without this process of having different perspectives coming in, that is the number one thing I've seen dropped in the middle, in between when I work on cases that are outside of insurance. Is what will happen is you'll say we have data exfiltration evidence in this network traffic. Here's the log, and it's in a gigabytes, megabytes. It's like a number. But then legal's like, can I please have the address list in a CSV format? Mm-hmm. And you're going, where's the middle piece? And they're like, IT security, figure it out. And you're like, we're not data analysts. We don't even know that system. We just know how it, like, we know the stuff left. And so there's like that missing piece. And before there were vendors for all of this, the companies, like I worked on like Home Depot and Anthem and all these groups that had huge incidents trying to connect to the data. And all their people inside were working, and that was the biggest bottleneck, was literally the spreadsheets to send out letters to do the things that you had to do. And nobody practiced that piece in there. So now there's vendors, they make it fast, but if you don't know that piece, the lawyers, the privacy counsel, the risk management, the CEO, the CEO, they're all gonna look straight at you and say, well, where's the data? Because they think it's a technical job.
Right, and it sounds like an administrative thing, but I can tell you from, we're racing to make sure that we comply with the notifications of the laws in the various states and the federal government if the industry applies. And so racing to that deadline can be hampered by digging through all the data and the data mining, looking for how much personally identifiable information is in there and who does it belong to. And now the data breach class actions I'm dealing with now, they're not only attacking the underlying causes of what happened to the breach, but the breach response afterwards, saying you took too long to look at what the problem was and you took too long to notify people. And now that's being used as another risk, another exposure to companies that are actually responding to the breach. See a question over here?
I do. I've been told now twice that there's no point in our having a forensics retainer with one of our security providers because our cyber insurer will basically force us to use theirs. And that sounded sketchy.
I got
And
this one.
So I'll ask you.
Go for it, Monique.
One of the biggest values, there's a couple of things in your question. One of the biggest values that cyber insurance policy brings to the insured is pre-vetting vendors and having a list of qualified, capable vendors that we've pre-negotiated rates with who we know have capacity to deal with issues. And well-experienced adjusters who can, determine which vendor best fits an incident, right? There are different kinds of cyber insurance policies. Some dictate that you have to use one of the vendors who are on the panel, and they pre-select who it's going to be. You have to use Redpoint, right? For all circumstances. Sometimes they even have breach counsel that act as a third-party claims administrator, right? Yet there are other kinds of cyber policies that do not require that and, not allow, but, as part of the contract, it's up to the insured to determine who they really want on, to work on the claim, but with the approval of the adjuster. So, you're kind of given a choice. If you go with the second alternative, it's essential that you have a well-crafted incident response strategy and a team that you've put together beforehand, right? However, you may have holes in that. There could be a new kind of cyber attack that comes out tomorrow, as you are well aware, and, do you have those people on your incident response plan? Maybe or maybe not. But we keep our ears to the ground. We know, before it even happens sometimes, that, okay, we need to have a payment processor for ransoms, for, cryptocurrency in the queue, right? Do you guys have that? Do you have that in your incident response plan? Probably not. So I hope that that's a decent answer to your question.
I'm going to add on just from the forensic perspective, because I've done cases where I've been kicked off, we've been kicked off of this incident. I think what's eye-opening is once you sit down with and say, we call companies insureds in this world, right? You're the one who is going to take out an insurance policy. If the insured looks at the list ahead of time, I think you'd be pretty surprised that there's sometimes your list 15 different exceptional brands that and can point to. The problem that we've actually seen more often isn't that you're not getting your pick, it's that you're picking Uncle Joe's IT down the street in your hometown, and that person
No offense
is
to Joe.
not. No, right. That's why I
Joe
made
does
a
great,
random name up, and and that person may be the reason that something was wiped and rebuilt in a way that does not preserve the evidence, doing things that are outside the scope. In fact, we have had even the IT people that are servicing the clients send us a server for forensic image. They pulled a forensic image, but they completely wiped it. So they sent it, lost 2 days to FedEx, and then it was useless, and we had to go, like, we lost it. So there's all of these hurdles that the whole vendor process and vetting it are trying to accomplish. So if you say, like, kick off, the other thing that I would ask is, did you even look at, on the preventative side, did you even look ahead of time to see if you could have worked with one of theirs, or asked if they could make an exception? Because I've seen with some of the policies you're mentioning that if you do your homework ahead of time and you, like, bother to make that effort, they're usually very agreeable. And in fact, renewal is probably the best time to ask for it, right? Get broker involved, have a question. I know that's probably not something you want to hear, but I do think you have to realize, is the problem on our side for not looking and asking for our vendor ahead of time, or waiting to the last minute and that not being approved? Because how are they going to trust if they don't know that vendor and haven't vetted that vendor through their procurement
Right,
process?
and I'll add one
Also-
last thing to this before we get your question, is the privilege part of it. Is that if you as a company have a firm that's providing security ongoing, if they prepare a report as a response to a breach, that might not be privileged. Whereas if the attack occurs, I then go and retain a forensic firm, that's privileged, that remains confidential to the remainder of this incident. So that's where the courts it's not consistent right now, because you could do the whole forensic investigation and courts are kind of coming down on how confidential can this be. And this is, again, when we tell clients, we're not trying to hide anything here, but you want to be able to control the narrative. How much do you want to release as opposed to what do you have to release? And if you bring in somebody and it's retained by a counsel, we cloak everything we touch with privilege, and that helps their whole response.
I got one more
Go ahead, add
follow-up.
that.
Also, it can be, and often is, a conflict of interest to have one of your security providers be retained for the forensic investigation, right? And that's definitely going to come up if there is third-party litigation. That'd be the first thing I'd go after. I'd be like, oh, really? The guy who caused your incident is the guy who's investigating the incident? Well, I call foul.
We are
And, you
stirring
know.
stuff up now. Look at this.
Yeah, we're making it all happen, you guys. You want
we
it wild, it's
also-
getting wild.
From someone who's told to sell retainers, though, I will say the other benefits besides this is you can also emphasize that they can get you a part of the panel, negotiate it, or if you have someone that you can differentiate the work you do ahead of time, you can know your infrastructure better. So there is value to retainers. It's just you have to kind of align all of your risk mitigation steps, including does your insurance match up with your retainer you just bought? And are
Yeah.
those pieces communicating?
Great
I'll add cynically real quick too, just from the underwriting perspective.
I'm shocked.
It's challenging, right? So like I had a lightning strike on my house, okay? I had to get a new panel installed, and the electrician came out and I said, well, I have homeowner's insurance involved. And he goes, well, there's two prices. If insurance is involved, it's this. If insurance isn't involved, it's this. And I said, why? And he goes, because it's insurance. I'm gonna take them for what they're worth, right? I can get some more money out of the whole thing. Vendors do the same thing, unfortunately. I'm not saying you guys do, but vendors who don't have a relationship with insurance companies go, oh, there's a big insurance company here? Well, I'm gonna, double, triple my rate, and I'm gonna get everything I can. So that's part of the reason we do have the relationships that we do. I'm not knocking anybody. I'm not naming names, but we've had some bad experiences. Okay, done. Thank you.
But you
Great
can't
question.
buy him a cocktail later.
Patiently later. Go for it.
So in the interest of full disclosure, I'm one of those federal regulators that you guys are referring to. One of the things that I've run into with many of the ransomware attacks at some of the unnamed banks that I've been involved in is that cloak of attorney-client privileges. And let me say that is entirely debatable at this point. The cloak of attorney-client privileges is never held up in any of the situations that I've been involved in. So just a a tidbit there. I'm not an attorney.
What did you get us
But
into,
I didn't
Chris?
even stay at a Holiday Inn last night, so I'm not even going to pretend to go there. But anyway, that's just a little.
Out of a deep and abiding respect for Chris, I'm not going to say anything.
So the question I have with that part of it is could you guys define what business interruption is? Because that seems to be, along with that, I guess that second to the top, on the top left slide or that box, contingent business interruption. There's a lot of confusion about what's going to be covered there, up to and including soft dollar costs such as the overtime,
Yep.
in order to get this thing straightened out over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. So I've got several questions, but I'll follow up after the conference.
No, it's perfect.
if-
Perfect segue to this slide, all the additional coverages. So why don't you, Pete, kick it off with the business interruption?
Yep, and I see you, don't worry. So I'll burn through these real quick, but right now, business interruption, it is defined within the policy. Every insurance company defines it their own way, so you have to look. It's specific to the contract. But generally speaking, it is your net income that is lost as a result. Now, where it gets murky is we also say we will pick up extra expense. Extra expense is defined as the additional expenses that were required to return you to where you were before that attack. That possibly could include overhead. That's going to include system restoration, whether we need to virtualize you and get you off into the cloud now, stuff like that. So that's generally how the policy defines it. So these are some coverage extensions that over the years we've seen the cyber policy evolve to include. System failure is any failure of the software. It typically doesn't include like a failure of power, but Southwest Airlines is a big example. They had a software failure. That if they had system failure on their program, I'm not familiar with their insurance program at all, I'm not saying that, but that would have triggered that. Contingent business interruption is when one of your suppliers that you rely on undergoes a cyber attack, and then they can't supply you, and therefore you can't continue your business now. Now, that does not typically include utilities or ISPs or that sort of thing. But if you have, say, a parts supplier or, ADP, a payroll processor, somebody that you're relying on to continue your business from an electronic standpoint, that will trigger that. Voluntary notification, it's when you're not sure whether or not you have a legal obligation to let people know, but you're going to do it out of goodwill anyway. Betterment is when we will pay up to a certain amount to replace and include better equipment than you had before. This is a big hot topic right now because it's almost impossible for me to just restore your old equipment if you're carrying a lot of tech debt right now. So just by virtue of setting you back up, you're probably going to get better equipment anyway. So Betterment starts to build some contractual limitations around
Right,
that.
and you wouldn't want to replace
A
an
Windows 12,
XP with an XP, would you? Right?
Yeah, like I'm not going to. SCADA coverage, you guys are probably familiar with, systems access and control devices. Property damage and spoilage, if it's because of an electronic peril, whether you have an HVAC regulatory system software that fails and all of a sudden, like let's say you're a meat locker or something, all your meat goes bad. And then failure to supply that's specific to utilities, but you're going to start to see cyber when they're writing for utilities include that as a coverage as well too. Okay,
There
done.
you go. That's a mouthful. Good job, Pete. All right, go for it.
Thank you. For those bottom three, as you think about SCADA systems maybe being compromised, leading to physical damage that could have third-party effects or failures to supply of maybe cloud services or grid, could you talk a bit about what you're seeing about either insurance gaps or insurability or application of limits?
Yeah, there's sort of two dimensions to that. So insurability is sort of an underwriting concept, right? It's a known secret that a lot of the utilities in this country are using very old SCADA systems. It's very expensive to update them. It's very expensive to web enable them and to get them to communicate with one another. I underwrite to that, and I'm not going to lie, it scares me. So that may affect pricing or whether or not I want to offer coverages to that effect. When it comes to the property damage, so our policies inherently are liability policies, but we're butting up against property policies right now because property kind of doesn't want to deal with cyber. They did for a little while, and then Mondelez happened, and they got cooked, and so now they're trying to put it back on us. That's putting a lot of pressure on our business because we are not underwriting to cover physical property damage. Maybe you get a small extension here or there, but that's not the kind of premium we're collecting. That's not what we're underwriting our product to. So you're going to see continued evolution, but my most intellectually honest answer for you right now is there's a gap, there's a conflict growing there.
But if you shop around, right, you want to blend your policies such that you have a combination of a commercial general liability policy, a commercial property policy, an equipment breakdown policy, right? And when you choose an equipment breakdown policy, you're going to want to look for one that includes physical damages that stem from your equipment breakdown.
Helps to have a really good agent,
Yeah. And really
Broker
good
agent.
insurer.
broker agent.
Broker, agent, whatever you call them.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for this panel, by the way. Just a quick question. You guys mentioned, insurance coverage for ransom payments, and immediately before, I guess, one of the events earlier preceding this event was kind of top 10 risks associated with ransom payments. And so I guess if you don't mind walking us through some of the legal factors to consider. I mean, as a lawyer, I understand some of the concerns, but as a in-house counsel, one of the biggest things is how would insurance cover a situation where, a payment is made to a threat actor who is on the OFAC sanctions list? I mean, those are cascading costs, it seems like. Would coverage for that payment also include, defense funds for going OFAC suing the company for paying that? Just open thoughts, but yeah, appreciate it.
I'm gonna preface it, but then I'm gonna let you knock
Okay,
this one out of the park. 'Cause
I spent 2 years of my life on this.
Yeah. The only thing I want to say is, as insurance companies, we can't do anything that's illegal. If OFAC says we can't pay, we can't pay. Now, how often does that happen?
Rarely. It rarely happens. And with our attitude as a company is we honor our contracts. We made a contract with our insured and we made them a certain set of promises. So if there's any way that we can make this happen, we are going to make it happen. But if the government says no, we can't. But what we'll do is we'll get around that, not get around the illegality part, but we'll honor our contract to the extent that we can. If you want to pay the ransom and you want to violate the law doing that, that is your business. We'll still cover, stuff like the ransom negotiation process and that kind of thing, the other first party and third party costs of the event, but we just simply cannot cover the ransom. And that's a complicated decision that is made internally, and we consult with our ransom payment vendors, and Violet knows, Chris knows, whenever there's something like Conti, it comes about, they get put on a sanctions list, I call the vendors, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about this? And then I report to, senior management and say, this is the consensus, or this is, the divisions, what do you want to do? So it is a tough call, but to the extent that we can accommodate, we do.
I think it's also impressive when you see the ecosystem around the insurance policy, you see the checks and balances that check for some of those things that legal might be concerned about, but may not align with one of the internal job functions of doing an OFAC check. And so we have these checks and balances where if you have need for a payment or you have a ransom negotiation, first of all, the ransom negotiation process, as mentioned, may just be a stalling technique. It may be a tactic used in the strategy of the overall investigation to try to get back up and running faster than the actual exploitation demand is made for. There's also information that can be gathered from loose lips from the threat actor. There's a lot of information that I've seen, and my eyes have been very much opened being on the threat actor negotiation side, that every time we engage and start talking to a threat actor, only a very small percentage are paid, and usually the payment, actually every negotiation I've seen, I have always seen the counsel and forensics say, this is the risk, and usually it's with a tone of don't pay, and I've seen multiple times someone else coming from the side, VC company that invests in the company saying, and I recently seen this, pay it, it's gonna get faster, they're telling you have 2 weeks to rebuild, And so sometimes there's this missing link from the expectations of how long the rebuild takes to do it the way you want to do it versus how much the COO and backing wants to get money in the door. So again, there's two sides to it where there are a lot of resources, checks and balance on the OFAC side and looking at paying a ransom or not paying. But the other thing that I didn't realize until I saw hundreds of these claims was if it's completely, and I don't want to make the statement, if it's completely not an option to pay, it is disproportionately affecting small to medium businesses because the backups, the ability, and the tech that they have is not as skilled and equipped as a company that has more funds to devote to backup and restoration.
Also, about 100% of the time, very close to 100% of the time, the ransom is negotiated down. So they may ask for $5 million coming in the door, then you pay $5,000 on the way out.
Yeah, and OFAC, not to rip on government agencies or anything, but it's kind of a one-dimensional solution to a three-dimensional problem.
I have a T-shirt that says that.
Yeah. And it is because you can't name this static list of people that can consistently change their identity and their attribution and the different software that, I mean, it just cannot possibly keep up, so.
And I think if you look into the kind of touching on the legal side, because you came from a legal perspective, if you look at the intent behind why OFAC put themselves in that position, I think the intent is clear that it was trying to encourage collaboration, which we've heard a lot about the last couple of days, is law enforcement wants to encourage collaboration, and the way that they're doing it is if there's known threat actors that they really don't want you messing with, they want you communicating with them back and forth to be able to prove why you might need
We're
to pay
stronger
certain.
together.
It's a collaboration technique
Well
more than
done.
Wow, that was
Well
good planted.
played.
That's really good. Yes, go for it.
So there's been a lot of news coverage in the industry whereby, insurers are basically saying they're not going to cover a nation-state attack. What are you seeing on that? And I guess, what are your thoughts on that? And what really qualifies as a nation-state attack that would
question.
prevent coverage?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it goes back to attribution, which is a major issue. Insurance companies don't want to be funding nation states that are threats to the security of the United States. We don't want to be funding Putin's war in Ukraine right now through ransomware payments, that sort of thing. By that same token, we don't know all the time, and there are a lot of insurance companies that are going to probably try to take a whack at not covering ransomware if they suspect it. I don't know how that's going to play out yet. I don't have a lot of answers. My company right now has not proceeded affirmatively on putting this. It's really a war exclusion is kind of what we're talking about here. My company has not proceeded affirmatively on trying to do that. I don't know how that's going to play out in the marketplace. My best answer, my most honest answer right now is I don't know. I don't know if you guys have additional perspectives on it, but.
Well, going back to attribution is often a political or diplomatic decision, right? And that all comes in and weighs in the balance, and it goes back to the insurance contract, honoring it, trying to do the best by the insured, and there's a risk to the insurer when they say, it's Conti, they're on the OFAC list, so we're not going to cover this event at all. It doesn't accrue to the insurer's benefit because they're probably going to get hit with a bad faith lawsuit. And then that will play out in the courts, and it'll be years before that's resolved. And not for nothing, the whole Mondelez case, where an insurer declined their claim in a NotPetya attack situation due to the war exclusion, that was never resolved in court. They settled it out of court, so we really
Much
have
to all of
no.
our chagrin.
Yes, there was a gnashing of teeth that I'm sure you all heard.
Both sides wanted an answer.
We wanted precedent. We wanted some establishment there, yeah.
Well, and for people that don't follow legal decisions like you nerds, the Mondelez case is also Oreo. So there were how many, like 1,700 servers down because of not paying in 2017, and we didn't get a affirmative decision on who was paying it until 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest issues.
And it was sealed, by the way, so we don't even know what.
Nobody knows what side they were leaning. They settled it, both sides, both the people that don't want insurance to, I don't know the difference. Both sides wanted a actual decision from the court to say, this is what we're going to cover. The problem is that even if we got a decision, it was a property policy.
Right.
It wasn't a cyber
Right.
policy.
It was not a
and
cyber
nobody
policy.
really shakes that up and says, we're not even talking about the right fact pattern.
Right. And by the way, Oreo production was not really affected by it, so
Oh, good.
made everybody
I didn't lose any
happy.
weight.
Yeah.
All right, go for it.
I had a question. I work with a firm, and we deal with a lot of SMBs. So we put tons of companies through insurance. Kind of, we are the guys trying to help fill out those questionnaires and educate the clients. We're starting to see a pattern where insurance companies are starting to do carve-outs for, so a company's getting ransomware, a ransomware policy or a rider on top of a security, a cyber policy. And we're starting to see like carve-outs where it's like, okay, you're getting $1 million policy, but the coverage drops to 100,000 if it turns out that the reason you were compromised is because the system had a CVE that was older than 65 days unpatched. Like just random like carve-outs. We're not seeing it like everywhere yet, but we're starting to see a couple firms starting to do that. Do you see that as a trend? Like, do you think in the future there's going to be so many carve-out and write-outs that essentially we're going to insure, and maybe insurance will be cheaper, but no one's really going to have the coverage or policies they think because any given thing could theoretically be proven. It's like, well, you thought you had a $5 million policy, you actually have a $100,000 policy because of X, Y, and Z.
It's a great question, and you asked the right panel because I am from HSB, right? Hartford Steam Boiler started because of a big steam engine explosion, and something like 2,500 people were killed in it. Following that, Hartford Steam Boiler was created to insure steam boilers, and in their business model, they helped to develop standards, right? Through both crafting the policies and crafting the standards, they improved the security and the safety of steam boilers moving forward, right? So that is what the intention is behind those kind of carve-outs, as you call them. We call them sublimits, right? So we will sublimit stuff like, a ransom can will in a $100,000 policy can be sublimited to say $5,000 or $10,000 or something like that. If you want a higher limit on that, you have to pay more. So then you have to, as a company, weigh in the balance. Right. Am I going to improve my security, or am I going to pay a higher, a higher premium, or am I going to have to get a higher deductible? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. Khaled Fatal. Although I'm attending RSA as a journalist, today normally I'm asking questions. Today I have an answer to the lady who asked about what happens to the nation-state attack and whether the policy will cover or not cover. And I'm putting now my hat as the chairman of the MLI. We have specific expertise in the cyber insurance policy audits. Peter, I think your answer was very honest, that you don't know, and I appreciate that. When it comes to attribution, governments and experts, organizations corroborate a lot of different intelligence information to determine where it started from. If a policy is perceived to be a nation-state attack, okay, the policy actually then defers to what happens if the position of the government determining that it was a particular country. Once that government establishes that they believe the attribution is, let's say, name a country, then you can assume that the policy, whether it will pay or not pay, will be a reflection of that. So for an insured, as Violet mentioned earlier on, you need to be aware what you do next, whether there's the political element in allocating attribution, whether it's the true attribution itself. And then your policy is subject to the political risks.
I think that I respect that as your opinion. I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, you don't have to agree. The truth of it is that many governments who have established attribution to certain events that have happened in the past few years can be questioned, but the position had been based on political policy. So, you know, I don't have to like it, you don't have to like it. The truth of the matter here is, if a government decides that it is a specific state that is behind the attack, it is possible, it's highly likely that the insurer can actually say, we will not pay because it's a nation-state attack.
Well,
Simple.
yeah, that's not the way that the war exclusion usually works. You usually need to have some kind of kinetic, some kind of physical damage in order for a war exclusion to apply. It's not based on attribution alone to a nation-state attack. I'd love to discuss it with you further after.
No, absolutely, but the policy is a cyber policy, not a property policy. So if a cyber attack has been attributed,
I do understand.
Yeah, so that's
I do understand.
the bottom line here is this is just something to consider.
Thank you.
Don't take my word for it, research it, but at least you get a bit more clarity to make a determination.
Research has been done by everybody on this bill.
Thank you. I know we have 4
Thank you.
minutes left, and we have some more questions. So you know what? We'll go for it.
Hello. So mine would be a bit on the future of cyber insurance. So I come from the research area on the cutting edge of AI safety, which is where security and ethics and do no harm meet. I do wonder to your position on what is cyber insurance going to do there. This is an unusual situation. An adversarial can mess around with the model and somebody take their life. Is that a liability, a third party? Is that a security problem, and who's going to pay?
Great question to end with,
I
right?
I think that's our last slide.
Before you answer, because I know you have an AI answer, I think what was very interesting is it's not just cyber insurance that's going to be affected by AI, because we're going to have every single commercial line and every single personal line that is changing some kind of part of their process, not in that, but in that everything they're covering, manufacturing and construction and healthcare, everyone's going to be using things differently, and so it's going to have a difference in the output of and claims. So we might have more of X and less of Y, less physical harm, but more XYZ harm. So it's not just cyber, and I'll pass it to you on that.
So AI carries with it the potentials of new threat vector, a very serious threat vector. ChatGPT can scale emails and clean them up and clean up all the English, all the little markers that we know that would lead us to believe that maybe it's not a legitimate email. It can clean all that up. So by that same token, AI can be our new analysis for threat vectors. It can do our intelligence gathering. We can also use AI against AI to try to identify AI. So I think as insurers, one of the reasons why when you talk to your brokers, you see a lot of volatility in your cyber pricing is that insurance is inherently a reactive product. So when things happen, the next year is when we get to react and try to grow with that. So unfortunately, I don't think you're going to see a lot of leveling on pricing for cyber. I think it's going to be a relevant purchase, but I don't think it's going to be like your directors and officers policy or your workers' compensation policy, where once a year you sit down and you go, oh, it's up 2%, it's down 2%. I mean, it's going to have a lot of variability, but you got to understand what we're doing right now is we're being grease for the economy. As interruptions happen for each one of these businesses, we can inject financial stability to keep those businesses running. Also, with the risk management standards that we're bringing, we can help businesses become better businesses. So yeah, it's not a perfect looking product. It's not going to be a boring insurance product. It's it's going to have some of that to it.
Right. Well, on that note, I think that's a great way to conclude our presentation, and we could take your questions offline. So thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.